Do you ever wonder how far love can take someone, beyond fear, beyond borders, beyond even their own family? Today, we're going to learn English through a powerful real-life inspired story that's full of emotion, decisions, and change. This isn't just about vocabulary or grammar. This is about connection. So listen closely, feel every word, and let the language become real for you. And before we begin, don't forget to subscribe to Arise Avenue, the place where stories teach you more than just English. Let's begin. Emily had never really questioned the world she lived in. She was 22, blonde, polite, raised in the quiet suburbs of North Carolina where lawns were always trimmed, people smiled at church, and everyone mostly thought the same way. Her life moved in a straight line: college, career path, someday marriage to a man her parents would quietly approve of. But things began to shift the moment she met Ayo. It was during a university lecture on post-colonial politics, a class she had taken only to fulfill a diversity requirement. Ayo sat in the back, quiet but focused. He had an accent, South African, and a presence that was hard to ignore. When he spoke, it was never just to participate, but to challenge the room. His thoughts were sharp, but it was his calm certainty that stayed with her. She approached him after class, just to say she liked his point of view. That short exchange turned into long conversations over coffee, then shared walks, and eventually, afternoons that spilled into evenings. Ayo didn't try to impress her. He didn't laugh too loudly at her jokes or pretend to agree with her opinions. He listened. He asked questions that made her uncomfortable, but not in a threatening way. More like someone pulling back a curtain she hadn't realized was there. Emily began seeing things differently. She started noticing the microaggressions in her friend group, the way people talked about race when they thought no one was listening, the subtle but unmistakable discomfort in her own home when topics of race came up during dinner. Her connection with Ayo grew slowly, quietly. There were no dramatic confessions, no fireworks. Just two people learning each other, recognizing something deeply human and honest in the other. She hadn't meant to fall in love with him. It just happened. But as her feelings deepened, so did the tension in her life. Her friends teased her at first, harmless jokes that quickly turned into warnings. Her roommate once asked if she wasn't worried about what people might think. Her father noticed her texting more often and asked casually, then sternly, who she was spending time with. She lied at first, said he was just a classmate, just a friend. But in her heart, she knew the truth was growing roots. One evening, after a quiet dinner with Ayo at a little Ethiopian place downtown, he walked her back to her apartment. It had started raining, but neither of them minded. They stood outside the building entrance, wet, laughing. Then, without much thought, she kissed him. A simple, honest kiss. For a second, the world fell away. No judgment, no fear, just warmth. The next morning, everything felt different. Not wrong, just heavier, more real. She didn't know it yet, but that kiss was the beginning of everything. Emily didn't tell anyone about the kiss. Not because she regretted it, but because she knew what it would trigger. In her world, some things were understood but never spoken aloud. You didn't date someone too different. You could be polite, progressive even, but there were invisible lines, and crossing them had consequences. Still, she kept seeing Ayo. Quietly, carefully. He never pressured her to define anything, and that made her want to define it even more. She found herself looking forward to their time together in a way that made the rest of her life feel dimmer. But hiding something real is exhausting. It started with skipped group chats, vague excuses to her friends, awkward silences when someone asked why she wasn't around. Her best friend Rachel noticed first. One night, while they were watching a movie, Rachel blurted, "You're seeing someone, aren't you?" Emily froze, then nodded. Rachel raised an eyebrow and laughed, expecting a familiar name. But when Emily quietly said, "His name's Ayo," the air in the room changed. Rachel's smile faded. "Oh," she said. "Just that, oh." And Emily knew exactly what that meant. Word got around faster than she thought it would. Someone had seen her and Ayo together at a bookstore. Another friend had spotted them walking in the park. Conversations started shifting around her. Invitations slowed. Group messages dried up. It wasn't violent or obvious, just cold, like a door slowly closing, and no one willing to admit they were the ones pulling it shut. She told herself it didn't matter. That love was bigger than this. But then it reached home. Her mother asked one evening over dinner, "Have you been spending time with that African boy from your class?" Her tone was casual, but her eyes were sharp. Emily paused, then answered, "His name is Ao." And yes. Her father looked up from his plate. Silence. Then came the lecture, wrapped in concern, framed as love, but laced with everything Emily had feared. "You don't understand what kind of life that will be," her mother said. "You're being naive," her father added. "People will judge you. We'll be judged. You're throwing away everything we've worked for." She didn't argue that night. Not because she agreed, but because she was stunned by how fast they turned from curious to cold. In the days that followed, the conversations didn't stop. Her father sent her articles. Her mother wept once, dramatically, accusing her of betraying her own. Her cousin called, tried to reason with her, told her she was in a phase. Through it all, Ao stayed calm, supportive. He never asked her to choose. But the choice was forming all on its own. Emily stopped going home on weekends. She stopped talking to most of her old friends. The loneliness crept in like fog, quiet, slow, and suffocating. But even in that isolation, something fierce started growing inside her. A clarity she hadn't known she was missing. She loved him. She was sure of it. But love alone wasn't going to be enough if she didn't learn to stand in it fully. The confrontation came faster than she expected. One Saturday morning, her mother showed up unannounced at her campus apartment. Emily opened the door, startled, still in sweatpants, and before she could say a word, her mother pushed past her. "Are you seriously doing this?" she said, pacing the room. "I saw the photos. You posted one with him. Publicly." Emily stayed quiet, heart racing. She hadn't meant to post it. It was just a soft moment. Ao laughing, sunlight on his face, no caption, just a memory she didn't want to hide anymore. But the silence from her family afterward had said everything. Her mother sat down and sighed. That heavy, performative kind. "You think this is love? It's not. It's rebellion." Emily clenched her jaw. "No, it's love. It's real. You just don't want it to be." By the time her father called that night, the verdict was clear. "If you keep choosing him, you're choosing to do this without us. No more support. No more pretending." There was no screaming, no dramatic breakdown. Just a dull finality. Her parents stopped speaking to her. Her bank account became her responsibility overnight. Rent, books, groceries, all hers now. She cried. That week, more than she'd ever cried. Not just for what she lost, but for what she had to become. She didn't tell Ao everything, not right away. But he knew. He always knew. One night, they sat in his small studio apartment, her head on his shoulder, both quiet. And for the first time, she whispered, "I left them for you." He held her tighter and said, "No, you left them for yourself." And deep down, she knew he was right. The days that followed were raw. Emily moved into a cheaper apartment near campus, taking up late shifts at a bookstore and tutoring to cover bills. Her world had shrunk. No parents, no safety net, only a cracked phone screen, leftover takeout, and a worn mattress on the floor. But for the first time, it felt like her world was finally hers. Ao never treated her like someone to fix. He helped. Where he could, late-night food runs, editing her essays, long walks when the pressure got too much, but he never made her feel small for struggling. In their quiet moments, she found peace. They didn't talk about forever. They talked about now, about the little victories, passing a tough class, making rent, cooking something half-edible. Then, one evening over dinner, Ao said something that changed the air in the room. "I've been thinking of going back home," he said gently. "To South Africa. My brother's starting a youth program. They need help. It feels right." Emily stared at him, fork frozen midair. "You're leaving? I want you to come with me," he said. Not as a test, not as an escape, just truth. She didn't answer right away. The idea of leaving the country, everything she knew, after just starting over, felt impossible. But so had loving him once. So had living without her family. And yet, here she was, breathing. That night, she lay awake, staring at the cracked ceiling. South Africa, a place she had only seen in photos through his stories, in the way his eyes lit up when he spoke about home. It was terrifying, and it made sense. Because if she had already lost everything fake, maybe it was time to start building something real. They landed in Johannesburg on a warm, dusty afternoon. The airport buzzed with unfamiliar sounds and accents, but Ao's face softened the moment. They stepped outside. Emily felt it too. Something unspoken, a hum beneath the chaos. She was halfway across the world, carrying nothing but 2 suitcases and a quiet resolve. The adjustment wasn't easy. The first few weeks were a blur of culture shock, different foods, different rhythms, different silences. People stared sometimes, not with hatred but curiosity. Ao's family welcomed her with cautious warmth. Polite but unsure. She understood. She was new, strange, unfamiliar. But she showed up every day, helping in the kitchen, listening to stories she didn't always understand, offering what she could. And slowly, they let her in. Ao began working with his brother in the township, helping run a youth education center. Emily went with him, unsure at first, then falling into the rhythm. She started teaching English and writing to teenage girls. They called her Sister M, half teasing, half loving. It felt small, but it mattered. She stopped thinking about the life she left behind. The silence from her family had become a dull echo. The pain was still there, but it didn't define her anymore. In this place, far from safety, far from approval, she was finally alive. One evening, as the sun dipped low and the children scattered for home, Emily stood outside the center, hands dusty with chalk, watching Ao talk to a group of boys. His voice rose in soft laughter, his hands animated. She smiled, quietly, fully. She didn't belong to anyone else's story anymore. She was writing her own. If this story touched your heart or helped you learn something new in English, don't forget to subscribe to Arise Avenue. Hit the like button and share it with someone who needs to hear this. Keep learning, keep feeling, and keep growing.